Welcome everyone to another episode of reviewing the differences between Shenmue the games and Shenmue the animation. And in this episode, we're going to review episode 7 of the animation, where there are quite a few differences, but a lot of similarities between the game and Shenmue itself, so that's pretty exciting. Now, usually I'm in a room where I'm like well lit everywhere, but now you see me kind of like in the dark. The reason is because I'm kind of doing stuff on my set, so it's unfortunately all the lights and stuff that's like taken out, so it's just me, one light on me, and we're gonna go with here. But without further delay, let's talk about this episode and the differences and similarities, mostly differences. That's what I want to go through. Spoiler alert, because I'm gonna get into the Shenmue series if you haven't watched this before, but I'm sure you have. So the first thing is that Ryo was introduced to Li Xiaotao after just learning one of the voodoo. The games differ because Ryo had to learn all 4 of the voodoo before he can meet Li Xiaotao. And then basically, right after they meet, they get into a fight in both the game and in the series, just kind of like a sparring match. But in the series, the sparring match happens inside of the Manmo Temple, while in the game, it happens outside of the Manmo Temple. Next up, Ryo meets Fang Mei right outside of the temple right after the sparring match. This didn't happen in the games until after the next morning where Ryo woke up in Xu Ying's room. Li Xiaotao is Xu Ying, as you know. Then moving on, Ryo is told to go to Guang Martial Arts School right here. This really didn't happen. You had to explore a little bit and ask questions before you found out to go to Guang Martial Arts School in the actual games instead of just being pointed right there. Now this, I think, is basically the animation's way of just cutting through the fat and getting right to what you need to know and where the story wants you to be taken in the series. So that's pretty good. I actually like that. It's like, let's just cut straight to the point. Next scene, Ryo goes right to the martial arts school where he meets Zoshan. But Zoshan in the actual animation never tells Ryo where this student is. But in the games, Zoshan tells you exactly where you can find Zhang Xuan. He's a performer and he's here, and just go find him. So that's a big difference. So moving on, rather than finding them all yourself, Joy actually wants to hang out. And then she says that she knows of a martial arts street performer in the mall and basically wants to take you there. And then Ryo's like, fine, I'll just go myself. So she helps him out and it kind of points him in the right direction rather than Ryo not getting that. Now that helps with some development in the story, which is pretty good. They're trying to make these characters involved in Ryo's mission, where in the games you were pretty much solo for much of it besides people's help here and there. So Joy is actually brought in and this connects later in the story, so that's pretty cool. Now finally, Ryo arrives at the mall where he meets Zhang Xuan, the street performer. The difference in the games and this, which is actually subtle but it's there, is that Zhang Xuan in the animation actually convinces Ryo to buy him a beer before anything happens. This didn't happen at all in the games. He just kind of introduces himself and says he's from Japan, and then they get right to the performance, where the animation squeezed in this beer. Now I wanted to know the significance of this beer. Now in this animation, the beer is called San Miguel beer, but the anime changed the beer's name because it's actually very similar to San Miguel Pale Pilsen, a Filipino pale lager produced by San Miguel Brewery. Now what's funny is that the animation and the actual beer do refer to the beer being established in 1890, so there you go. Now the significance of this beer is that it's the largest selling beer in both the Philippines and Hong Kong, so that's why they used it. Now another detail that differs between the games and the animation is that when Ryo mentions that he knows Zhang Xuan's master, in the games Zhang Xuan almost immediately gives you the letter to give to his master. While in the animation, no, we're going to build some tension here, and he just walks away. Now here is totally added original storyline from the animation, which this episode did a lot of. But you see Ren and Joy speaking with each other, and Ren is asking about this Japanese martial artist. And Joy's like, you know what? He's in the mall. Why don't you go check him out? So again, building story and building up to them actually meeting each other. Pretty cool. Now this is also different too, because Ryo, after meeting Zhang Xuan, goes back to the martial arts school and tells Zoshan that he met Zhang Xuan. And Zoshan fills you in on a little bit of the backstory over what happened, which was nice and interesting to hear the story of Zhongshuan and why he was kind of expelled, which was him just showing martial arts off. Now here in this next scene, we actually have the Yellowhead Gang going after Ryo, and then eventually Zhongshuan, who sees this happening. Now this didn't happen in the games. The Yellowhead Gang was constricted only to the Kowloon portion of the game. So it's interesting that it's actually happening here. Now, quick shot in this next scene, you see Ryo running away with Zhongshuan as they're escaping the Yellowhead Gang, and then Ren walking towards them all, and then they just quickly pass by each other, having no idea that they actually just passed each other, which again, building up to them meeting each other, which is pretty interesting. Next scene, we see Shu Ying actually thinking about her brother before Fang Mei interrupts. That's a very interesting part of the story that we really never got resolution on in the games, is what happened between Shu Ying and her brother. Obviously there's backstory to the murder of Shu Ying's father, and who did it, and how it happened, and why Shu Ying's brother wanted to join the Chiyumin. Maybe we might have the potential to see things that we haven't seen about that story, which is still pretty interesting. Now here we cut back to Ryo talking to Zhongshuan about the Yellowhead Gang. He mentions that the Yellowhead Gang deals with the underworld in Hong Kong. Now that's interesting because we know that they were in Kowloon, but we never got any context that the Yellowhead Gang reached Hong Kong or was that far reaching. Will we see Kowloon in this series? I'm not sure at all, but it's almost like they're going to stay in Hong Kong. It's just different. How can this series actually go to Kowloon and then go to Guilin? A lot of different places in such few episodes left that we have, so who knows? We'll find out in future episodes, I'm sure. Next we have Ryo actually meeting with Joy to grab a bite to eat, which was nice after Ryo was told, hey, you gotta pay rent, this place isn't free. And Ryo hasn't paid anything there because he thought that Joy was hooking it up. So when they go out, Joy actually states one line as they're just having typical conversation on how Ryo is just showing off his martial arts. And she says, a rough cat doesn't show his claws out in the open. This kind of sets off a light bulb in Ryo, and he's like, I got it, now it all makes sense. And then we progress from there. So moving on in this next scene, Ryo goes back to the mall where he finds that Zhongshuan is getting attacked by the Yellowheads once again, and he's like, wait, stop, now I get it. You didn't want to show off your moves because you wanted to respect your master's teachings. And that was basically the basis of this episode and the basis of how Zhongshuan didn't fall from grace. He's still respecting his master's teachings. And at that point, Zhongshuan finally gives the letter to give to Zhoushan, his master, which we saw way back earlier in the game that didn't use all of this character development. So it's interesting that this actual series, even though it rushes a lot of like the unnecessary like gameplay elements that we would have played, but really takes us time to expand on emotional development and tying you into everything that's happening that really matters in the series, which I actually really appreciate this perspective. And then moving on, finally we have Zhoushan receiving the letter and then of course sharing with Ryo one of the 4 voodoo, which is Ji. So the anime refers to Kai or Ji as keep your heart free of conceit, never use force blindly or flaunt technique. So now that's 2 voodoo that Ryo knows. So Ryo finally shows up to Manmo Temple to tell Shu Ying that, yes, I know about the 2nd voodoo. And then he explains that he learned about it and that's probably what Shu Ying thought of him, like he was just flaunting his technique. And she's like, yeah, I thought of that, but there's still so much more. And she also says basically, I'm still not gonna help you. I'm not telling you anything. And then Ryo says, well, I'm not giving up either. So we're pretty much at a stalemate. And that's just kind of interesting that it shows Ryo's persistence and it shows Shu Ying's also stubbornness too, to not really share because she wants Ryo to really get it before she'll help him. And knowing that he was that stubborn and that he really wanted to achieve his goal no matter what. But that stubbornness also reminds Shu Ying of her brother and what happened there. So recalling that, she's like, maybe there was something I could do to like save him. And maybe that's why she was like, okay, let's go. I'll take care of you. You'll have a place to stay with me. So then moving on, they finally go to Shu Ying's room. And this was kind of crazy amount of detail because I compared the overall look of this room here to the game, and it is surprisingly accurate. They paid attention to a lot of detail. But there is like one little poster here that has a little bit more in the animation than the actual game showed. So kudos to the animators. They're like, hey, let's actually add a little bit more detail, which is not easy to do in animation. But of course, this is a still shot that it was probably easier to do. Still, respect to the animators here. And in this scene also, Shu Ying finally shares her name to Ryo. She says, my name is Shu Ying Hong. Where in the game, she actually shared her real name way back in Manmo Temple when they first were about to spar. So that's also a huge difference. But I think stalling on her actual name added more relevance and more connection to them at this point, which is, I think, where Shu Ying and Ryo are actually going to start building a connection. And here's a quick shot of Fang Mei being happy that she cleaned Shu Ying's room before Ryo came, and she knew that she would have to do it for a good reason. She's just so nice. Such a sweet character, and I'm glad that they're showing her to be that personality, which is very similar to the games. Then, of course, next we have just a shot of Shenhua just looking up. These last few episodes have showed just Shenhua just really like thinking and not doing much. Again, similar to the games in many senses, especially to Shenmue 1, where in that game, you really didn't see anything of Shenhua, and it was just like a mysterious girl. In here, now she's still kind of mysterious. She had some dialogue in the first few episodes, but now it's just, she's just quiet, like pondering, like what's going on. So I guess that's what they're trying to establish with that shot. And then finally, one of the interesting things that I wanted to bring up is that they show the credits that still highlight Nozomi. And it was questioned on whether they would actually start showing like characters from Shenmue 2 in the credits and switch it up, which I thought they would have done in the last episode, but the last episode had more dialogue going into that episode. So it was interesting to see here that they actually showed still the same credits. They didn't do like new credits there, which is fine. Anyway, that's it for the episode. What did you guys think of this particular episode? I'm posting this tonight, so getting ready for Shenmue The Animation Episode 8, which premieres tonight on Crunchyroll and on Toonami at midnight Eastern Standard Time. So definitely check that out. Thanks for watching as always, and I'll catch you next time. And of course, you can make my day if you subscribe today. This is Magnus, and I'm out. Hit that like button as well if you want to see more of this stuff too. See you guys later. I'm out. It's so dark in here.